That kiss was not surrender. It was a declaration of war. The air in the Iron Citadel courtyard tastes like iron and snow. Cold bites through skin, through bone, straight into the marrow where fear lives. Torchlight flickers against ancient stone walls, casting shadows that dance like specters hungry for blood. The pack has gathered. Hundreds of them. Shoulder to shoulder, breath misting in the frozen air, eyes gleaming with that particular kind of anticipation that only comes before an execution. They want justice. They want spectacle. They want to see an Omega fall. And Ylva Moondusk is about to give them something they will never forget. She stands at the center of it all, chains biting into her wrists until the iron tastes like copper in her mouth. Her feet are bare against the stone, mud and blood caked between her toes. The thin tunic she wears, the only thing left from her life as a scullery maid, is torn at the shoulder, exposing skin that's already turning blue from the cold. But she doesn't shiver. She doesn't cry. She doesn't beg. Because Ylva Moondusk learned a long time ago that begging only makes the wolves hungrier. The great stone of judgment rises before her like a tombstone waiting to be carved. It's older than the kingdom itself, stained dark with centuries of blood. This is where traitors die. This is where the accused kneel and wait for the blade to separate bone from bone, life from body, soul from flesh. High Elder Lowell Savage stands to the right of the stone, his gray beard streaked with oil, his eyes sharp and cold as winter steel. He holds a scroll in his gnarled hands, the charges, written in the old tongue, sealed with the blood-red wax of the Iron Codex. His voice carries across the courtyard like the toll of a funeral bell. Ylva Moondusk. Orphan. Omega. Scullery maid of the northern kitchens. You stand accused of treason against the pack of Vargr. You poisoned the grain stores. You sabotaged the winter rations. You brought famine to your own people. The crowd roars. Fists pound against chests. Howls rise into the night like prayers to a merciless moon. Ylva's heart pounds so hard she thinks it might crack her ribs. But she keeps her chin up. She will not give them the satisfaction of seeing her break. Not yet. Not ever. Lowell's lips curl into something that might be a smile if it weren't so cruel. The punishment for treason is death. Immediate. Public. Undeniable. And by order of the Council of Elders, the sentence will be carried out by the hand of the one wolf whose authority cannot be questioned. The courtyard goes silent. Even the wind seems to hold its breath. Then the gates open. The sound of hoofbeats echoes through the stone corridors like the rhythm of a war drum. Slow, deliberate, unstoppable. The Blackstone Legion rides in first, 20 wolves in black armor, their eyes cold, their movements precise. They form a line along the perimeter, blocking every exit, every escape route, every sliver of hope. And then he appears. Alpha King Axton Blackstone, the executioner of the North. He rides a black warhorse that moves like smoke, like shadow, like death itself. His armor is dark as the void between stars, etched with runes that shimmer faintly in the torchlight. A great sword rests across his back, a blade so massive it would take 3 men to lift, yet he carries it like it weighs nothing at all. His cloak is made of black wolf fur, and it drapes over his shoulders like the wings of some ancient, predatory bird. But it's his face that makes Ylva's breath catch. He is beautiful in the way a storm is beautiful. Sharp cheekbones. A jaw carved from granite. Eyes the color of molten gold that burn with an intensity that could melt steel. There is no warmth in those eyes. No mercy. No hesitation. He has killed hundreds. And he will kill her without a second thought. Axton dismounts in one fluid motion, his boots hitting the stone with a sound like a judge's gavel. The crowd parts for him. Even the elders step back. Because this is not a man. This is a force of nature. This is law made flesh. He walks toward the great stone of judgment, and every step feels like a countdown. 10 steps. 9. 8. Ylva's chains rattle as the guards yank her forward. Her knees scrape against the stone. They want her to kneel. They want her to bow her head and accept her fate like a good little Omega, like a broken thing that knows its place. But Ylva is not broken. Not yet. Not ever. 7 steps. 6. 5. Axton stops in front of her. He towers over her like a mountain, like a monument to everything she will never be. His shadow swallows her whole. He doesn't speak. Doesn't acknowledge her. He simply reaches behind his back and draws the great sword. The blade sings as it leaves the scabbard, a high, clear note that cuts through the silence like a scream. 4 steps. 3. 2. Lowell's voice rises again, reading the final words of the sentence. By the authority of the Iron Codex and the will of the pack, the sentence is death. Let the blade fall. Let justice be done. Let the traitor's blood stain the stone as a warning to all who would betray Vargr. The crowd howls. Axton raises the sword. And Ylva remembers. She remembers her mother's voice, soft and cracked with age, whispering stories by the dying embers of a kitchen fire. Stories of the first wolves. Stories of laws older than kings, buried deep in the Iron Codex where no one bothers to look anymore. Stories of a right so ancient, so sacred, that even the cruelest Alpha could not break it. The right of the bonded. The right of sanctuary. Her mother had called it a fairy tale. A legend. A hope for the hopeless. But Ylva has nothing left but hope. 1 step. The sword hangs in the air, poised to fall. And Ylva moves. She doesn't think. She doesn't plan. She just acts. Because in this moment, frozen between life and death, she understands something fundamental about survival. Sometimes the only way to live is to risk everything. She breaks from the guard's grip, her chains yanking free with a sound like bones snapping, and she lunges forward. Not away from the blade. Not away from the Alpha King. Toward him. She crashes into him with all the force of desperation, her hands grabbing the edges of his armor, her body slamming against his like a wave breaking against a cliff. And before he can react, before anyone can stop her, before the world can catch up to what she's doing, Ylva Moondusk presses her lips to the Alpha King's. The courtyard explodes. But Ylva doesn't hear it. Because the moment her lips touch his, the world shatters. A shockwave of power rips through the air like lightning striking the earth. Ancient magic, old, furious, and undeniable, surges through her veins like molten gold. Her skin burns. Her bones ache. Her heart stops and restarts and stops again. And then she feels it. The bond. It snaps into place with the force of a star collapsing, a connection so deep, so primal, so absolute that it rewrites reality itself. She can feel his heartbeat thundering in her chest. She can taste his shock on her tongue. She can see the golden runes blazing to life on her neck, burning into her skin like brands from the gods themselves. The mark of the mate. Axton's greatsword falls from his hand. It hits the stone with a sound like the end of the world. And for the first time in his reign, the Alpha King drops to one knee. Not in weakness. In recognition. Ylva pulls back, gasping, her lips still tingling with the taste of him, smoke and steel, and something wild she can't name. She looks down at him, this king, this executioner, this wolf who was supposed to kill her. And his golden eyes are wide with something that looks almost like fear. The execution is no longer possible. The law has spoken. And Ylva Moondusk, the Omega Scullery Maid, the accused traitor, the girl who was supposed to die, has just become the most dangerous woman in the kingdom. If you're still here, if you're feeling that pull in your chest, that hunger to know what happens next, please subscribe to Cindy's Wolfheart Stories and let know where you are watching from. The world doesn't end all at once. It fractures, splinters, breaks apart in jagged pieces that cut on the way down. The courtyard erupts into chaos. Wolves are screaming, some in outrage, some in terror, some in a confusion so complete they don't know which direction to run. The guards lunge forward, weapons drawn, but they freeze mid-step because the rules have changed and no one knows what the new rules are. High Elder Lowell Savage's face twists into something inhuman. His lips pull back from yellowed teeth, his eyes bulging with a rage so pure it could burn cities. Witchcraft, he shrieks, spittle flying from his mouth. Sorcery. Dark magic. She has bewitched the king. But his words are drowned out by the sound Ylva hears in her own head, a low, resonant hum that feels like the earth itself is waking up. The runes on her neck pulse with heat, glowing brighter with each heartbeat. She can feel them now, etched into her skin like living things, like chains made of starlight and ancient promises. And she can feel him. Axton Blackstone kneels before her, one knee pressed to the stone, his head bowed not in submission but in something older. Something sacred. His chest rises and falls with controlled breaths, but Ylva can sense the storm raging beneath his skin. The bond between them thrums like a second heartbeat, tangled and raw and undeniable. When he finally looks up at her, his golden eyes are blazing. Not with anger, with recognition. You knew, he says, and his voice is low, rough, like gravel scraped across steel. It's the first time he's spoken directly to her, and the sound of it reverberates through her bones. You knew what would happen. Ylva's throat is dry. Her hands are shaking so hard she has to clench them into fists to stop the trembling. I knew the law, she whispers. Her voice cracks, fragile as glass. I didn't know if it would work. Something flickers across his face, surprise, maybe, or respect, but it's gone before she can name it. He rises to his feet in one smooth motion, towering over her again, but this time it doesn't feel like a threat. It feels like a shield. He turns to face the crowd, and the entire courtyard falls silent. Alpha King Axton Blackstone doesn't shout. He doesn't need to. His presence alone commands attention the way gravity commands the fall of rain. When he speaks, every wolf in the citadel listens. The right of sanctuary has been invoked. Lowell's face goes white. My king, this is... Silence. One word. Spoken quietly. But it cuts through the elder's protest like a blade through butter. Axton's gaze sweeps across the assembled pack, cold and absolute. The Iron Codex is the foundation of this kingdom. It is the law that binds us. The law that gives us order. The law that makes us more than animals. He pauses, letting the weight of his words settle over them like snow. And the Iron Codex recognizes the right of the bonded. The mate bond cannot be severed by decree. It cannot be ignored by convenience. And it cannot be overruled, not by council, not by king, not by God. A murmur ripples through the crowd. Fear, confusion, disbelief. Lowell steps forward, his hands clenched so tightly his knuckles have gone white. The bond is false. She used dark magic to. The mark does not lie. Axton's voice is iron. Final. He gestures toward Ylva, and every eye in the courtyard follows his hand to the glowing runes on her neck. The mark of the mate. Ancient symbols that shimmer with their own inner light, visible to every witness, undeniable as the sun. This mark is given by the first wolves, Axton continues. It cannot be faked. It cannot be forced. It simply is. He turns his gaze back to Lowell, and there's something dangerous in his eyes now. Something that makes the elder take an instinctive step backward. If you claim otherwise, you claim the Iron Codex itself is false. And that, Elder Savage, would be treason. The word hangs in the air like a noose. Lowell's mouth opens and closes, but no sound comes out. Around him, the other elders are silent, their faces carefully blink. They know the game being played. They know the trap that's been sprung. Challenge the bond, and you challenge the law. Challenge the law, and you become the traitor. Ylva watches this unfold with a detachment that feels almost dreamlike. Her body is still trembling from the aftershock of the bond snapping into place. Her neck burns where the runes have marked her. And through it all, she can feel Axton, his presence pressing against her mind like a hand on her shoulder, steady and immovable and impossibly real. She didn't plan this. She didn't expect to survive the kiss, let alone for it to actually work. But now that it has, now that the bond is real and visible and witnessed by hundreds of wolves, she understands the magnitude of what she's done. She has tied her fate to the most powerful and most dangerous wolf in the kingdom. And she has no idea if he will protect her or destroy her. Axton turns back to her, and for a moment, their eyes meet. In that brief connection, Ylva sees past the armor, past the reputation, past the cold mask of the executioner. She sees a man who is just as trapped as she is. A man bound by laws he didn't write, carrying out sentences he may not believe in, wearing a crown that weighs more than any sword. She sees exhaustion, loneliness, and something else, something that looks almost like relief. "You are under my protection," he says, his voice pitched low enough that only she can hear. "By law, no one can harm you while the bond holds. But understand this, Ylva Moondusk, if you are guilty of the crimes you've been accused of, I will kill you myself. The bond does not grant immunity from justice. It only grants you the right to a fair trial." His words should terrify her. They should make her want to run, to flee, to do anything but stand here in the shadow of a man who still believes she might deserve death. But instead, they fill her with something unexpected. Hope. Because for the first time since she was dragged from the kitchens in chains, someone is offering her a chance to prove her innocence. Not mercy. Not pity. Just the law, applied fairly, without prejudice. It's more than she ever thought she'd get. "I didn't poison the grain," she says, and her voice is stronger now. Steadier. "I discovered the poison. I was trying to report it when they arrested me." Axton studies her for a long moment, his golden eyes searching hers as if he can read the truth written in her soul. Then he nods once, sharp and decisive. "Then we will find the truth." He turns back to the crowd, raising his voice so that every wolf can hear. "I invoke the trial by truth. Ylva Moondusk will be held under guard in the King's Tower. The investigation will begin at dawn. Evidence will be gathered. Witnesses will be called. And when the truth is revealed, whatever that truth may be, justice will be served." He looks directly at Lowell as he says this, and there's a promise in his gaze. A warning. Until then, Axton continues, any wolf who harms her, threatens her, or interferes with the investigation will answer to me personally. Is that understood? Silence. Then, slowly, reluctantly, the crowd begins to disperse. Guards step back. Elders turn away. The spectacle is over. The execution has been postponed. And a scullery maid who was supposed to be dead is now standing beside the Alpha King as his bonded mate. Ylva's legs finally give out. She sways, her vision blurring at the edges, the adrenaline that kept her upright finally draining away. She expects to hit the stone. Expects the world to go dark. But a hand catches her. Strong. Steady. Warm despite the cold night air. Axton's hand. He doesn't cradle her. Doesn't sweep her into his arms like some romantic hero from the tales her mother used to tell. He simply holds her upright, his grip firm but not painful, his presence a solid anchor in a world that's spinning too fast. Can you walk? He asks. Ylva nods, even though she's not entirely sure it's true. Good. He releases her slowly, watching to make sure she doesn't collapse. Because we have a long night ahead of us. And I need answers. He gestures to two of his guards, wolves from the Blackstone Legion, their faces hidden behind dark helmets. Escort her to the King's Tower. 3rd level. The Eastern Chamber. Post guards at the door and the window. No one enters without my direct permission. The guards nod and move to flank Ylva. She expects them to grab her, to drag her like the other guards did. But they don't. They simply walk beside her, their hands resting on their sword hilts, their eyes scanning the crowd for threats. Because she's not a prisoner anymore. She's the king's mate. And that changes everything. As they lead her away from the great stone of judgment, Ylva looks back over her shoulder one last time. Axton stands alone in the center of the courtyard, his black cloak billowing in the wind, his great sword still lying on the stone where he dropped it. He's watching her leave with an expression she can't quite read, part curiosity, part wariness, part something that might be the beginning of understanding. For just a moment, their eyes meet again. And through the bond, she feels it, a pulse of emotion so strong it nearly knocks her off her feet. He's angry, confused, afraid, but beneath it all, buried so deep he might not even recognize it himself, there's something else. Relief. Because for the first time in a decade, the curse that's been eating him alive from the inside out is quiet. The pain is gone. And he doesn't know why. Ylva turns away before the tears can fall. She lets the guards lead her through the stone corridors of the Iron Citadel, past tapestries depicting ancient battles and walls carved with the names of dead kings. Her bare feet leave bloody prints on the floor. Her chains have been removed, but her wrists are still raw where the iron bit into skin. She should be dead right now. She should be bleeding out on the great stone of judgment, her body left as a warning to anyone who dared defy the pack. But instead, she's alive, protected by the most dangerous wolf in the kingdom, bound to him by a law older than time itself, and caught in a game she doesn't fully understand, with stakes she can't even begin to imagine. The guards open a heavy wooden door and gesture for her to enter. The room beyond is small but clean: a bed, a table, a single window overlooking the mountains. It's a prison cell dressed up as a guest room. But it's better than the dungeons. Better than the stone. Better than dead. Wait here, one of the guards says. His voice is gruff but not unkind. The king will send for you when he's ready. Then they close the door and Ylva is alone. She walks to the window on trembling legs and presses her forehead against the cold glass. Outside, snow is falling again, soft and silent, covering the bloodstains in the courtyard, covering the evidence of what almost happened. Her reflection stares back at her from the dark glass, a ghost of a girl with wild hair and haunted eyes and glowing runes burned into her throat. She touches the mark gently, feeling the warmth radiating from the symbols. They're real. The bond is real. And somewhere in the citadel, Axton Blackstone is feeling the same connection, the same pull, the same impossible truth. They're bound now, for better or worse, until death or the law tears them apart. Ylva closes her eyes and lets out a breath she didn't know she was holding. She survived the execution. Now she just has to survive what comes next. The room is too quiet. Ylva sits on the edge of the bed, her hands folded in her lap, her body still trembling from the aftershocks of what just happened. The mattress beneath her is soft, too soft. She's spent her entire life sleeping on straw pallets in the servants' quarters, on cold stone floors when the pallets were full, on nothing at all when she was cast out into the snow as a child. Soft things don't last. Soft things aren't meant for girls like her. She stares down at her hands. They're calloused and scarred from years of scrubbing pots, hauling water, kneading bread dough until her knuckles bled. The nails are broken and dirty. There's a burn across her left palm from where she grabbed a hot iron poker last winter to defend herself from a drunk warrior who thought an omega scullery maid was fair game. She remembers the way he'd laughed when she'd burned him. The way the other servants had looked away, pretending they hadn't seen. The way the head cook had slapped her afterward and told her to keep her head down, keep her mouth shut, keep breathing only as much as necessary. Because that's what Omegas do in Vargr. They survive by being invisible. And Ylva had been so good at being invisible. Until tonight. She touches the mark on her neck again, feeling the heat of it pulsing beneath her fingertips. The runes are complex, interwoven in patterns she doesn't fully understand. They look like the ancient script carved into the oldest parts of the Iron Codex, the sections written in the tongue of the first wolves, the laws that predate kingdoms and crowns and the cruelty of civilization. Her mother had known those symbols. Her mother had whispered their meanings while stirring soup over dying fires, her voice soft and sad and full of a longing that Ylva hadn't understood back then. She understands it now. The memory comes without warning, sharp and vivid as a knife to the ribs. Ilva is 7 years old, small for her age, with tangled black hair and eyes too big for her face. She sits cross-legged on the kitchen floor, wrapped in a blanket that's more holes than fabric, watching her mother work. Her mother is beautiful in the way winter is beautiful, cold and distant and fragile. Her name is Mira Moondusk, and she moves through the world like a ghost, like she's already halfway to whatever comes after this life. She stirs a pot of thin broth, her hands shaking slightly, her eyes focused on something Ilva can't see. "Mama," Ilva says, her voice small in the cavernous kitchen. "Why don't we have a pack?" Myra's hand stills on the spoon. For a long moment, she doesn't answer. Then, slowly, she sets the spoon aside and kneels down beside her daughter. Her hands are cold when they cup Ilva's face. "We do have a pack, little moon," she whispers. "It's just a very small one. Just you and me. But everyone else has families. They have fathers and brothers and—" "Hush." Myra's thumb brushes across Ilva's cheek, wiping away a tear Ilva didn't realize had fallen. "Listen to me carefully, my darling. There are wolves in this world who believe that strength is the only thing that matters. That power is the only currency worth trading. They look at us, at Omegas, at the weak, at the different, and they see nothing worth protecting." Ilva's bottom lip trembles. "Are we nothing, Mama?" "No." Myra's voice is fierce now, a crack in the ice that usually covers her words. "We are everything they're too blind to see. We are the ones who remember the old ways. The ones who carry the stories when everyone else forgets. The ones who know that survival isn't about being the strongest, it's about being smart enough to endure." She pulls Ilva close, holding her tight against her chest. Ilva can hear her mother's heartbeat, fast and irregular, like a bird trapped in a cage. "There are laws older than the Alphas, little moon. Laws written in the stars and the stone and the blood of the first wolves. Laws that say every wolf, no matter how small, no matter how powerless, has the right to sanctuary. The right to be heard. The right to stand before the moon and claim their place in the world." "But how?" Ilva asks, her voice muffled against her mother's shoulder. "How do we claim anything when we have nothing?" Mira pulls back and looks into her daughter's eyes. There's something desperate in her gaze, something that looks like hope mixed with grief. "You use the one weapon they can never take from you," she says. "You use the law itself. Because law is stronger than any alpha. Law is the only thing that can bind even kings." She touches Ilva's chest, right over her heart. "Remember this, my darling. If you are ever in danger, if you are ever at the mercy of wolves who would see you dead, there is a right. An old magic woven into the very fabric of the Iron Codex. It's called the right of sanctuary. And if you can invoke it, if you can make them see you, then not even death can touch you." Ilva doesn't understand. Not really. She's 7 years old, and the world is already too big, too cruel, too complicated. But she nods anyway. And her mother smiles, sad and small and already fading. 3 months later, Mira Moondusk is dead. They find her body in the snow outside the citadel walls, frozen solid, her eyes still open and staring at the stars. The official report says she wandered off during a storm. Got lost. Succumbed to the cold. No one investigates further. No one cares enough to ask questions. Because she was just an Omega. Just a ghost. Just nothing. Ilva gasps, the memory releasing her like a hand letting go of her throat. She's back in the tower room, alone, the weight of her mother's words pressing down on her chest like stones. "You use the law itself." That's exactly what she did tonight. She used the one weapon her mother had given her, knowledge of a law so old, so buried, that even the elders had forgotten it existed. And it had worked. Against all odds, against all reason, it had actually worked. But at what cost? Ilva stands and walks to the window again, pressing her palms flat against the cold glass. Her reflection stares back at her, a stranger wearing her face. The mark glows softly on her neck, a brand that marks her as something she never wanted to be. Bonded, claimed, connected to a wolf who could kill her with his bare hands. She thinks about Axton Blackstone, about the way he looked at her in that courtyard. There had been anger in his eyes, yes. Confusion. Wariness. But there had also been something else, something that felt almost like understanding. He hadn't wanted to execute her. She'd seen it in the split second before she'd kissed him, in the way his jaw had tightened, the way his grip on the sword had shifted slightly. He'd been preparing to do his duty, to uphold the law, to be the executioner everyone expected him to be. But he hadn't wanted to. And now, through the bond, she can feel him. Not his thoughts, the connection isn't that strong yet, but his emotions. They wash over her in waves, distant and muted, but undeniably there. Anger, confusion, frustration. And underneath it all, buried so deep it's almost hidden, relief. He's relieved. But why? Ylva closes her eyes and tries to make sense of the sensations flooding through her. The bond is new, raw, unpracticed. It's like trying to hear a conversation through a thick wall. She can catch fragments, impressions, echoes, but not the full picture. What she does catch, though, is pain. Not physical pain. Something deeper. Older. A wound that's been festering for so long it's become part of him, woven into his bones, inseparable from who he is. And somehow, impossibly, the bond has dulled that pain. Ylva's eyes snap open. That's why he's relieved. Whatever curse or wound or burden he's been carrying, it's gone. Or at least, it's quieter. And he doesn't understand why. She touches the mark again, feeling the warmth of it, the pulse of ancient magic still humming beneath her skin. The rite of sanctuary wasn't just about saving her life. It was about something bigger. Something the first wolves understood, but modern wolves have forgotten. The mate bond doesn't just connect two souls. It heals them. A knock at the door makes Ylva jump. Her heart hammers against her ribs as she turns away from the window. "Enter," she says, and her voice sounds stronger than she feels. The door opens, and one of the Blackstone Legion guards steps inside. He's carrying a tray with bread, cheese, and a cup of something that steams in the cold air. "The king thought you might be hungry," he says, setting the tray on the table. His voice is neutral, professional, giving nothing away. Ylva stares at the food. Her stomach clenches with hunger. She hasn't eaten since yesterday morning, but she doesn't move toward it. "Is this poisoned?" she asks. The guard's head tilts slightly. "No, my lady. Don't call me that. The king has claimed you as his mate. By law, you hold the rank of queen consort until proven guilty of treason. Therefore, you are my lady." Ylva wants to laugh. Or scream. Or maybe both. Instead, she just nods. "Thank you for the food." The guard inclines his head and turns to leave, but Ylva's voice stops him. "Wait." He pauses, one hand on the door. "The king," Ylva says slowly, choosing her words carefully. "How long has he been in pain?" The guard is silent for a long moment. When he finally speaks, his voice is quieter. Almost human. 10 years, my lady. Since the day he took the crown. Some say it's a curse. Others say it's the weight of the kingdom itself. But he's never spoken of it. Not to anyone. And tonight, the guard hesitates. Tonight, for the first time in a decade, he didn't flinch when he drew his sword. He didn't pause to steady himself before mounting his horse. He stops himself, as if realizing he's said too much. He didn't look like he was dying, Ylva finishes softly. The guard meets her eyes for the first time. There's something like gratitude in his gaze. "No, my lady. He didn't." Then he leaves, closing the door quietly behind him. Ylva stands alone in the room, her mind racing. She'd thought the kiss was just about survival. Just about invoking an ancient law to save her own life. But it was more than that. So much more. She'd saved him too. Without meaning to. Without knowing. She'd broken a curse that had been slowly killing the most powerful wolf in the kingdom. And now they're bound together, two broken things made whole by accident, by desperation, by the ancient magic of the first wolves. Ylva walks to the table and picks up the cup. It's tea, bitter and strong, the kind that keeps you awake when your body wants to shut down. She drinks it slowly, letting the heat spread through her chest, chasing away the cold that's lived in her bones for as long as she can remember. She thinks about her mother. About the way Mira had looked at the stars like she was searching for something she'd lost. About the way she'd whispered stories of old magic and forgotten laws while the pack slept around them oblivious. Her mother had known. Somehow, impossibly, Mira Moondusk had known that one day her daughter would need those stories. Would need that knowledge. Would need the courage to kiss an alpha king on the edge of a blade and trust that the old laws would hold. Thank you, Mama, Ylva whispers into the empty room. Outside, the snow continues to fall. The citadel sleeps. The pack dreams of blood and justice and spectacles that didn't happen. And in the king's tower, a scullery maid who was supposed to be dead stands at the window and watches the stars, the same stars her mother once watched, and wonders if she's strong enough to survive what comes next. She doesn't know the answer yet. But she knows one thing for certain. She's not invisible anymore. And there's no going back. Dawn breaks cold and gray over the iron citadel. Ylva doesn't sleep. She sits by the window through the long hours of night, watching the sky shift from black to deep purple to the pale, washed-out blue of early morning. Her body aches with exhaustion, but her mind won't stop racing. Every time she closes her eyes, she sees the courtyard. The stone. The blade hanging in the air. The moment before everything changed. She touches the mark on her neck. It stopped glowing, but she can still feel it, a warmth that pulses in time with her heartbeat, a constant reminder that she's no longer alone in her own skin. Through the bond, she can sense Axton. He hasn't slept either. His emotions are a storm, controlled on the surface, churning underneath. He's in the war room, she thinks, or maybe the archives. Somewhere deep in the citadel where he can think without interruption. He's trying to understand what happened. Just like she is. A knock at the door pulls her from her thoughts. This time, she's ready for it. Enter. The door opens and a woman steps inside. She's tall, angular, with silver hair braided in the old style and eyes the color of winter ice. She wears the robes of a keeper, one of the wolves who guard the Iron Codex and maintain the ancient laws. A scroll is tucked under her arm, and there's something in her expression that makes Ylva's stomach tighten. Not hostility. Curiosity. Ylva Moondusk, the woman says, her voice smooth and measured. I am Keeper Signa. The king has requested that I speak with you. Ylva stands slowly, her bare feet silent on the stone floor. About what? About the mark you bear. Signa's gaze drops to Ylva's neck, and something flickers in her eyes, recognition, maybe, or wonder. And about the laws you've invoked. She gestures to the table. May I? Ylva nods, and Signa crosses the room with a kind of grace that comes from decades of practiced movement. She sets the scroll on the table and unrolls it carefully. The parchment is ancient, yellowed with age, the edges crumbling despite the careful preservation. The text is written in the old tongue, symbols and runes that Ylva recognizes, but can't fully read. This, Signa says, tapping the scroll with one elegant finger, is a section of the Iron Codex that hasn't been referenced in over 300 years. Most wolves don't even know it exists. The elders certainly don't, or if they do, they've chosen to forget. Ylva leans closer, studying the symbols. Some of them match the mark on her neck. Others are different, more complex, layered with meanings she can only guess at. What does it say? She asks. Signa's lips curve into something that's almost a smile. It speaks of the first wolves. The original pack that walked these lands before kingdoms, before laws, before civilization turned us into something we were never meant to be. She pauses, her finger tracing a particular symbol, a wolf beneath a crescent moon. They understood something we've forgotten. That power without balance is tyranny. That strength without compassion is cruelty. and that every wolf, regardless of rank, regardless of blood, carries within them a piece of the moon's light. Ilva's throat tightens. My mother used to tell me stories like that. About the first wolves. About old magic. Your mother was wise. Signa looks up, her ice blue eyes meeting Ilva's. She taught you the rite of sanctuary, didn't she? She told me about it. I didn't know if it would actually work. It worked because the law recognized you. Signa straightens, folding her hands in front of her. The rite of sanctuary isn't just words, Ilva. It's a test. A calling. The ancient magic woven into the Iron Codex can only be activated by a wolf who carries the bloodline of the first wolves. Someone who is meant to invoke it. Ilva's breath catches. What are you saying? I'm saying you're not just a scullery maid who got lucky. Signa's voice is gentle but firm. The mark that appeared on your neck? It's not random. It's the mark of the Moondusk line, one of the 3 founding bloodlines of Vargr. Your ancestors were among the first wolves who established this kingdom. They were the ones who wrote the laws you invoked last night. The room tilts. Ilva grabs the edge of the table to steady herself, her mind reeling. That's impossible. I'm an Omega. My mother was a servant. We had nothing. We were nothing. You were hidden, Signa corrects. There's a difference. She pulls out another scroll, older than the first, and spreads it beside the other. This one contains a genealogy chart, names and lines connecting across generations like the branches of a great tree. Signa's finger traces one particular branch, following it down through the centuries until it ends with 2 names. Mira Moondusk. Ilva Moondusk. Your mother was the last surviving daughter of the Moondusk line, Signa says quietly. She was hidden as a child during the purge of the old families, a political massacre orchestrated by the new ruling class to eliminate anyone who might challenge their authority. The Munsks, the Stormcallers, the Nightbringers, all 3 founding bloodlines were hunted down and killed. Or so everyone believed. Ilva stares at the names on the parchment. Her mother's name. Her own name. Written in ink centuries old, as if they'd been waiting there all along. My mother never told me any of this, she whispers. She was protecting you. Signa's expression softens. If anyone had known who you were, you would have been killed before you reached your first shift. So she taught you to be invisible. To survive. To wait. Wait for what? Signa gestures to the mark on Ilva's neck. For this. For the moment when the old laws would wake up again. When someone from the founding bloodlines would stand before power and demand to be seen. Ilva shakes her head, overwhelmed. I didn't demand anything. I just wanted to live. And in doing so, you've changed everything. Signa rolls up the scrolls carefully. The mate bond between you and King Axton isn't just a personal connection. It's a political one. A symbolic one. By binding himself to a Moondusk, he's acknowledged, whether he realizes it or not, that the old bloodlines still have power. That the old laws still matter. That the kingdom needs to remember what it's forgotten. She meets Ilva's eyes again, and there's something fierce in her gaze now. There's a prophecy, Ilva, written in the oldest sections of the Iron Codex. It speaks of a time when the kingdom would fall into darkness, when power would corrupt even the strongest wolves, when law would become a weapon instead of a shield. And it says that in that darkest hour, one of the founding bloodlines would rise again. Not through force, not through conquest, but through the invocation of the ancient rites. Ilva's hands are shaking. What does the prophecy say will happen? Signa is quiet for a long moment. When she finally speaks, her voice is barely above a whisper. It says the one who bears the mark will either save the kingdom or burn it to ash. The words hang in the air like smoke. Ilva wants to laugh, or scream, or run, but her body won't move. She's frozen, trapped between the weight of what Signa is telling her and the impossibility of believing it. I'm not a savior, she says, her voice cracking. I'm just trying to survive. Survival is the first act of revolution, Signa says gently. And sometimes the greatest heroes are the ones who never wanted to be heroes at all. They're just people who refuse to die quietly. She places a hand on Ilva's shoulder, warm, solid, grounding. The king will want to see you soon. He'll have questions. And you'll need to decide how much you're willing to tell him. Signa pauses. But know this. Axton Blackstone is not your enemy. He may be bound by duty, by law, by the expectations of a kingdom that's forgotten its own history. But he's also searching for something. Something he lost a long time ago. And I believe you might be the key to helping him find it. What is he searching for? Ilva asks. Signa's smile is sad. The same thing you are. A reason to believe that this world is worth saving. She gathers the scrolls and tucks them back under her arm. As she moves toward the door, Ilva's voice stops her. Keeper Signa? The woman turns. Why are you telling me all this? You're risking yourself by revealing these records. By acknowledging my bloodline. The elders, Lowell Savage, they'll see you as a threat. Signa's expression doesn't change, but her eyes gleam with something that might be defiance. I've been a keeper for 40 years, Ilva. I've spent my life guarding laws that most wolves have forgotten and records that collect dust in the dark. I've watched this kingdom grow more corrupt, more cruel, more disconnected from the principles it was founded on. And I've hoped that someone would come along who could remind us what we're supposed to be. She reaches for the door handle, then pauses. You kissed an Alpha King on the edge of a blade and survived. You invoked laws that haven't been spoken in 3 centuries. You bear the mark of the moon dusk line, and the ancient magic recognized you. Signa's voice is fierce now, proud. If that's not a sign that the old ways are waking up, then I don't know what is. And I'll be damned if I'm going to stand by and let the elders bury you the way they buried your ancestors. She opens the door, and the morning light spills into the room. The king will send for you within the hour. Be ready. Then she's gone, and Ilva is alone again. But not really alone. Because now she knows. She's not just a scullery maid who got lucky. She's not just a desperate Omega who invoked an ancient law to save her life. She's a Moondusk, descended from the first wolves, marked by ancient magic, bound to an Alpha King, and caught in the middle of a prophecy that could save the kingdom or destroy it. Ilva walks back to the window and looks out over the citadel. The sun is fully up now, casting long shadows across the courtyard. She can see wolves moving below, guards changing shifts, servants hauling water, elders gathered in small clusters, whispering and plotting. Somewhere in the depths of the citadel, Axton Blackstone is preparing to question her, to investigate the poisoning, to uncover the truth. And Ilva realizes something that makes her blood run cold. Lowell Savage framed her for treason because she discovered the poisoned grain. Which means he's the one who poisoned it. Which means he's the real traitor. And he knows that if the investigation proceeds fairly, if the truth comes to light, he'll be the one standing before the great stone of judgment. He won't let that happen. He'll do whatever it takes to ensure Ilva dies before she can expose him. Which means the trial isn't just about proving her innocence. It's about surviving long enough to bring the real traitor to justice. Ilva touches the mark on her neck one more time, feeling the warmth of it, the pulse of ancient power that she still doesn't fully understand. Her mother had taught her to be invisible, to survive by staying small and quiet and unnoticed. But that's not an option anymore. The prophecy has been spoken. The mark has appeared. The old laws have awakened. And Ilva Moondusk, Omega Orphan, descendant of the first wolves, is about to walk into a war she never asked for. But this time, she won't walk alone. Because somewhere in the citadel, connected to her by a bond that can't be broken, an Alpha King is waking up to a truth he never expected. That the scullery maid he was supposed to execute might be the only thing standing between his kingdom and its destruction. And that saving her might mean saving himself. The door opens again, and a guard appears. "My lady," he says, bowing slightly. "The king requests your presence in the Hall of Records. The investigation begins now." Ilva takes a deep breath. Then she straightens her shoulders, lifts her chin, and walks out of the room like she was born to it. Like she's not just a survivor. but a queen. The Hall of Records is a cathedral of memory. Ilva has never been inside before. Servants don't enter places like this, places where history is preserved, where power is documented, where the past sits in judgment over the present. The ceiling arches high above her head, carved with images of wolves running beneath stars. Shelves line the walls from floor to ceiling, packed with scrolls and books and ledgers that smell of old paper and older secrets. At the center of the hall stands a massive table carved from a single piece of black stone. Around it are gathered the wolves who will decide whether she lives or dies. Alpha King Axton Blackstone sits at the head of the table, his presence dominating the space even though he's perfectly still. He's removed his armor, wearing instead a simple black tunic that somehow makes him look more dangerous, not less. His golden eyes track her as she enters, and through the bond, she feels a pulse of something complex, recognition mixed with wariness, mixed with something that might be concern. To his right sits High Elder Lowell Savage. The old wolf's face is a mask of righteous fury, his hands folded on the table, his eyes burning with hatred barely contained. He looks at Ilva the way a hunter looks at prey that's escaped the trap, with rage and the promise of a second chance. To Axton's left is Keeper Signa, her silver hair gleaming in the morning light, her expression neutral, but her eyes sharp. And beside her, two other elders, Elder Tormund, a scarred warrior with more battles behind him than years ahead, and Elder Kasha, a sharp-faced woman whose political cunning is legendary. And at the far end of the table, standing rather than sitting, is someone Ilva recognizes, but has never spoken to. Rowena Nightspawn. She's everything Ilva is not: tall, elegant, powerful. Her black hair cascades down her back in perfect waves. Her dress is cut from silk the color of midnight, fitted to emphasize curves that speak of wealth and leisure. She's an alpha female from one of the most prominent families in the kingdom, and everyone knows she's been positioning herself to become Axton's chosen mate for years. The look she gives Ilva could freeze blood. So Rowena says, her voice smooth as poisoned honey, "This is the Omega who bewitched our king." Axton's hand slams down on the table. The sound echoes like thunder. Enough. One word. Quiet. Absolute. Rowena's jaw tightens, but she says nothing more. Axton gestures to an empty chair across from him. Sit, Ilva. She crosses the hall on legs that feel steadier than they should. She's wearing the same torn tunic from last night. No one thought to bring her fresh clothes, and her feet are still bare. She's painfully aware of how she must look compared to Rowena's elegance, compared to the elders' formal robes, compared to the king's contained power. But she sits anyway, and she meets his eyes without flinching. The trial by truth begins now, Axton says, his voice carrying through the hall. Ilva Moondusk stands accused of poisoning the grain stores of Vargr, an act of treason punishable by death. Under the protection of the mate bond and by invocation of the right of sanctuary, she has the right to a fair investigation. Evidence will be presented. Witnesses will be called. And the truth, whatever that truth may be, will be revealed. He leans forward slightly, his gaze locked on hers. Tell us what happened. From the beginning. Ilva's throat is dry. She can feel every eye in the room on her, weighing her, judging her, waiting for her to stumble. But her mother's voice echoes in her memory. You use the law itself. So she speaks. I worked in the northern kitchens. Scullery detail. My duties included hauling supplies from the storage cellars to the cooking stations. Her voice is steady, clear. 3 days ago, I was sent to retrieve flour for the evening bread. When I opened the grain sacks, I noticed something wrong. The flour smelled off. Bitter. Like almonds mixed with something chemical. And you recognize this as poison? Elder Tormund asks, his scarred face skeptical. My mother was a healer before she died. She taught me to recognize the smell of common toxins. This was oleander extract mixed with something else, something I couldn't identify. Lowell Savage sneers. How convenient that a simple scullery maid would have such extensive knowledge of poisons. How convenient, Ilva shoots back, that a High Elder would be so quick to dismiss evidence before it's even examined. The room goes silent. Axton's eyes gleam with something that might be approval, but he says nothing. Ilva continues. I didn't touch the contaminated flour. I went immediately to find the head cook to report it. But before I could reach her, 3 guards seized me. They dragged me to the council chamber, accused me of poisoning the grain myself, and locked me in the dungeons. I wasn't allowed to speak. Wasn't allowed to defend myself. By morning, I was condemned. Because you were caught in the act, Lowell says coldly. Multiple witnesses saw you standing over the poisoned grain with your hands covered in flour. I was examining it, trying to determine how widespread the contamination was. Or you were sabotaging our winter supplies. Ilva's hands clench into fists under the table. Why would I do that? I'm part of this pack. Poisoning the grain means starving myself along with everyone else. What possible motive could I have? Revenge, Rowena interjects smoothly. She's moved closer to the table now, her fingers trailing along the stone surface. Everyone knows your mother died in disgrace. Some say she was mad. Others say she was a traitor herself. Perhaps the daughter inherited the mother's hatred of the pack that rejected her. The words are designed to cut. And they do. But Ilva doesn't let the pain show. She's had years of practice hiding wounds. My mother died of exposure after wandering into a snowstorm, Ilva says quietly. The pack didn't reject her. They just didn't notice she existed. There's a difference. Is there? Rowena's smile is cruel. Because from where I stand, you've spent your entire life invisible and powerless. And the moment you get the chance to strike back, to make them see you, you take it. Even if it means destroying the pack in the process. That's not enough speculation, Axton cuts in. His voice is sharp, controlled, but Ilva can feel the anger simmering beneath it. We deal in evidence, not theory. Elder Savage, you were the one who ordered her arrest. What evidence did you have at the time? Lowell straightens, his expression smoothing into practiced sincerity. Witness testimony, my king. 3 kitchen servants reported seeing her near the grain stores at odd hours over the past week. She was observed handling sacks without supervision, behaving suspiciously. And when the poisoning was discovered, she was found standing over the contaminated grain with residue on her hands. Who were these witnesses? Ilva demands. Let them testify here. Let them speak in front of the king and explain exactly what they saw. Lowell's eyes narrow. They've already given their statements to the council. Then let them give their statements again. Axton's voice is cold. If their testimony is truthful, they should have no problem repeating it. For just a moment, something flickers across Lowell's face. Fear, maybe. Or calculation. Of course, my king. I'll have them summoned immediately. Good. Axton turns to Keeper Signa. Have the grain stores been examined? Yes, my king. Signa unfolds a parchment in front of her. Our investigation confirms that 17 sacks of flour were contaminated with a mixture of oleander extract and nightshade powder. Both are deadly in the quantities used. If the flour had been baked into bread and distributed to the pack, we would have lost hundreds of wolves within days. The weight of those words settles over the room like a shroud. Where are the contaminated sacks now? Axton asks. Sealed in the evidence vault. Under guard. And the poison itself? Where would someone acquire that much oleander and nightshade? Signa's eyes flick toward Lowell for just a fraction of a second before returning to Axton. Both plants grow wild in the southern territories, my king. But in those quantities, concentrated and mixed, that would require access to an apothecary or an herbalist with significant resources. Resources a scullery maid wouldn't have, Elder Kasha points out. She's been quiet until now, watching everything with the calculating gaze of a political strategist. Which raises an important question. If Ilva Moondusk did poison the grain, who supplied her with the materials? Lowell's jaw tightens. Perhaps she stole them. From where? Kasha's tone is sharp. The only apothecary in the citadel is locked and under supervision. The royal herbalist keeps meticulous records of every substance in his stores. If something was stolen, there would be documentation. Then perhaps she acquired them before arriving at the citadel. She's worked in these kitchens since she was 13 years old, Keeper Signa says quietly. She's never left the citadel grounds. Not once. The silence that follows is damning. Rowena clears her throat, drawing attention back to herself. There's another possibility we're not considering. She looks directly at Ilva, her eyes glittering with malice. What if the contamination was accidental? What if this Omega simply didn't know what she was handling? She admits her mother taught her about poisons. Perhaps she was experimenting, trying to learn, and made a terrible mistake. That's absurd, Ilva says. Is it? Rowena tilts her head. You're an Omega with knowledge of toxins, working alone in the grain stores, handling substances you barely understand. Accidents happen, especially when ignorant hands meddle with things beyond their comprehension. The insult is deliberate, calculated, designed to provoke. And it works. I'm not ignorant, Ilva says, her voice rising despite her efforts to stay calm. And I didn't contaminate the grain. I discovered it. There's a difference. So you claim. So I know. Then prove it. Rowena leans forward, her smile sharp as a blade. Prove you're innocent. Prove you didn't sabotage your own pack. Prove you're worthy of the bond you've stolen. I didn't steal anything. You kissed the king without permission. Rowena's voice cracks like a whip. You invoked ancient laws to save your miserable life. You forced a bond on the most powerful wolf in the kingdom, a bond that should have been mine. And there it is. The truth beneath all the accusations, all the malice, all the carefully constructed theories. Rowena wanted to be queen. And Ilva stole that future from her with a single, desperate kiss. Axton rises slowly from his seat. The movement is deliberate, controlled, but the air in the room changes. Becomes heavier. More dangerous. Rowena Nightspawn, he says, his voice low and deadly. You overstep. Rowena's eyes widen, but she doesn't back down. My king, I only speak the truth that others are too afraid to voice. This Omega has manipulated you. She's used your honor against you. She's under my protection. Axton's golden eyes blaze. And she will be treated with the respect that status commands. If you cannot do that, you may leave this hall. Rowena's face flushes red. For a moment, Ilva thinks she might actually challenge him. Might push back against the king himself out of sheer wounded pride. But then she bows her head, just slightly. Just enough. As you command, my king. But the look she gives Ilva promises war. Axton turns his attention back to the table. We will reconvene this afternoon after the witnesses have been questioned. Until then, Ilva remains under guard in the king's tower. No one is to approach her without my direct permission. He looks at Lowell when he says this. The old elder's face remains carefully neutral, but Ilva can see the fury burning behind his eyes. Council dismissed. Everyone rises except Ilva. She sits frozen, her heart hammering, her mind racing. The investigation has barely begun, and already the battle lines are clear. Lowell Savage wants her dead. Rowena Nightspawn wants her humiliated. And Axton Blackstone wants the truth, whatever that truth might cost him. As the elders file out of the hall, Ilva feels the weight of their gazes like stones against her skin. She's made enemies today. Powerful ones. And they won't stop until she's destroyed. But she's also learned something important. She's not fighting alone. Because when Rowena accused her, when Lowell tried to twist the narrative, Axton had defended her. Not because he believed in her innocence, not yet, but because he believed in the law. And the law says she deserves a fair trial. It's not much, but it's more than she's ever had before. The hall empties until only 3 wolves remain, Axton, Signa, and Ilva. Axton approaches slowly, his footsteps echoing in the vast space. He stops in front of her, close enough that she can see the exhaustion in his eyes, the tension in his jaw, the weight of a crown that never stops pressing down. Tell me the truth, he says quietly. Did you poison the grain? Ylva meets his gaze without hesitation. No. For a long moment, he studies her, searching for lies, for cracks, for any sign of deception. Then, finally, he nods. Good. Because if you're innocent, we're going to prove it. And if someone framed you. His voice drops, becoming something dark and dangerous. Then I'm going to find out who. And they're going to wish they'd never been born. He turns and walks away, his black cloak billowing behind him. And Ylva sits alone in the Hall of Records, surrounded by the weight of history, and wonders if she'll survive long enough to see justice done. Or if the wolves circling her will tear her apart before the truth can set her free. The afternoon sun slants through the tower window, painting everything in shades of amber and shadow. Ylva sits on the bed, her knees drawn up to her chest, trying to process everything that happened in the Hall of Records. The accusations. The hatred in Rowena's eyes. The barely concealed fury radiating from Lowell Savage. And underneath it all, the steady presence of Axton, controlled, methodical, seeking truth in a world built on lies. She touches the mark on her neck. It's warm, pulsing gently, and through it she can feel him. He's close. Closer than before. Moving through the citadel with purpose, his emotions a carefully contained storm. He's coming here. The realization makes her heart race. A knock at the door. Not the formal, distant knock of a guard. Something different. Heavier. Enter, she says, her voice steadier than she feels. The door opens and Axton Blackstone steps inside. He's alone. No guards. No witnesses. Just him, filling the small room with his presence, making the air feel thicker somehow. He's still wearing the black tunic from earlier, but his hair is slightly disheveled now, as if he's been running his hands through it. There's a tension in his shoulders that speaks of exhaustion barely held at bay. For a moment, they just look at each other. Then Axton closes the door behind him and leans against it, his golden eyes studying her in the fading light. The witness is recanted, he says quietly. Ylva's breath catches. What? The 3 servants who supposedly saw you acting suspiciously near the grain stores. When I questioned them privately, away from Lowell's influence, they admitted they were coerced. Threatened. One of them was told her family would be exiled if she didn't testify against you. Another was promised a promotion. The third was just terrified of defying an elder. Relief floods through Ylva so intensely she feels dizzy. Then I'm not exonerated yet. Axton cuts in, but his voice is gentle. Their recantation proves the testimony against you is fabricated, but it doesn't prove who actually poisoned the grain. We still need evidence. Something concrete that points to the real traitor. He pushes off from the door and crosses to the window, standing beside it with his arms folded. The sunset light catches the sharp angles of his face, the weariness in his eyes. I've been king for 10 years, he says, his voice low. 10 years of upholding the law, executing sentences, maintaining order. I thought I understood this kingdom. Thought I knew who the threats were. But standing in that hall today, watching Lowell Savage lie with such conviction. He shakes his head. I realized I've been blind. Willfully blind. Ylva unfolds herself from the bed and stands, her bare feet silent on the stone. You weren't blind. You were doing your duty. There's a difference. Is there? He turns to look at her, and there's something raw in his expression. Something vulnerable. I almost killed you yesterday, Ylva. I stood over you with my sword raised, ready to execute an innocent wolf because the council told me to, because the law demanded it, because I never questioned whether the charges were true. You couldn't have known. I should have. His voice cracks slightly. A king should know. Should see through the lies. Should protect the innocent instead of nearly becoming their executioner. Ylva takes a step closer. The bond pulses between them, warm and insistent, urging connection. You're protecting me now, she says softly, because you forced my hand. But there's no anger in his words. Just exhaustion. Just honesty. That kiss, it changed everything. Bound us together. Made it impossible for me to ignore you. I'm sorry. He looks at her sharply. For what? For forcing the bond. For using the law against you. She gestures helplessly. For taking away your choice. Axton is quiet for a long moment. Then, to her surprise, he laughs. It's a rough, tired sound, but genuine. You think you took away my choice? He shakes his head. Ilva, you gave me one. For the first time in 10 years, I had a reason to question. To investigate. To actually see what's happening in my own kingdom instead of just blindly enforcing laws written by wolves who may not have our best interests at heart. He steps closer, and suddenly the space between them feels charged. Electric. Do you know what I felt when you kissed me? He asks, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. When the bond snapped into place? Ilva can't speak. Can barely breathe. Relief, Axton says. Pure, overwhelming relief. Because for 10 years, I've been dying. Slowly. Quietly. There's been this pain, like something vital inside me was rotting away. Every day it got worse. Every day I wondered if I'd wake up. And I never told anyone because a king doesn't show weakness. A king doesn't admit he's breaking. He touches his chest, right over his heart. But when that bond formed, the pain stopped. Just stopped. For the first time in a decade, I could breathe without feeling like my ribs were cracking. Could move without every muscle screaming. Could exist without carrying the weight of a curse I never understood. Ilva's eyes burn with unshed tears. The keeper said you were cursed. That it started when you took the crown. I thought it was the price of power. The burden of rule. But now, he looks at her, really looks at her, and there's wonder in his eyes. Now I think it was something else. Something the old magic understood even if I didn't. What do you mean? Axton reaches out slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she doesn't, he touches the mark on her neck. His fingers are warm, calloused, gentle. The first wolves believed in balance, he says. That power without compassion becomes tyranny. That strength without mercy becomes cruelty. I've spent 10 years being strong, being powerful, being the executioner. But I forgot how to be anything else. And the curse, if that's what it was reminding me. Killing me slowly because I'd become exactly what the kingdom didn't need. His thumb traces one of the glowing runes. Then you appeared. An Omega who should have been powerless but wasn't. A scullery maid who carried the bloodline of the first wolves in her veins. Someone who understood that survival requires more than strength. It requires intelligence. Courage. The willingness to risk everything for a chance at justice. I was just trying not to die, Ilva whispers. And in doing so, you reminded me what it means to live. The air between them feels impossible to breathe. The bond pulses, stronger now, pulling them together like gravity. Axton, Ilva says, using his name for the first time. It feels strange on her tongue. Intimate. What happens when this is over? When we prove my innocence? When we expose Lowell? I don't know, he admits. The bond is real. The law recognizes it. But that doesn't mean. He trails off, struggling with words. You didn't choose this. Not really. You chose survival. And I don't want you to feel trapped by a decision you made in desperation. Ilva looks up at him, this alpha king who holds her life in his hands, who could destroy her with a word or save her with a gesture. And she realizes something that terrifies and thrills her in equal measure. She doesn't feel trapped. She feels seen. For the first time in her life, someone is looking at her, really looking, and seeing not an Omega, not a servant, not nothing, but someone worth saving. Someone worth fighting for. Someone worth believing in. What if I told you, she says slowly, carefully, that given the choice, knowing everything I know now, I'd still kiss you. Axton's breath catches. His hand is still on her neck, warm against the mark, and she can feel his pulse racing through the bond. Why? He asks. Because you're not just an executioner. You're not just a king following orders. You're a wolf who wants truth. Who seeks justice. who's willing to question everything, even himself, to find what's right. She places her hand over his, holding it against her neck. And, because when I look at you, I don't see someone who wanted to kill me. I see someone who was trapped just like I was. And maybe together we can both find a way to be free. For a long moment, Axton doesn't move, doesn't speak, just stands there with his hand on her neck, his eyes searching hers, the bond humming between them like a living thing. Then, slowly, he leans down. His forehead touches hers. Not a kiss. Not yet. Just connection. Just presence. Just two broken wolves finding something like peace in each other's orbit. Stay alive, Ylva Moondusk, he whispers. Stay alive long enough for me to prove your innocence. Long enough for us to burn down the corruption in this kingdom. Long enough for me to figure out if what I'm feeling is just the bond, or something more. I'll try, she whispers back. That's all I ask. He pulls away slowly, reluctantly, and the absence of his touch feels like cold water. I have to go, he says. There's evidence to gather. Witnesses to question. A traitor to unmask. He moves toward the door, then pauses. But I'll be back. And tomorrow, when the council reconvenes, I'll have proof. Real proof. And Lowell Savage will answer for what he's done. Be careful, Ylva says. He's desperate. And desperate wolves are dangerous. Axton's smile is sharp. Predatory. So am I. Then he's gone, and Ylva is alone again. But this time, the loneliness feels different. Because she knows he's coming back. And she knows, somehow, that they're going to survive this. Together. Midnight comes with blood on the wind. Ylva wakes to the sound of breaking glass. She's on her feet instantly, her heart hammering, her body moving on instinct honed by years of survival. The window has shattered inward, shards glittering like fallen stars across the stone floor. Cold air rushes into the room, carrying with it the scent of snow and something else. Smoke. Fire. The citadel is burning. She runs to the broken window and looks out. Below, in the courtyard, flames engulf the western barracks. Wolves are screaming, running, trying to organize a response. But there's chaos everywhere, confusion, panic, the kind of disorder that only comes when someone has planned destruction down to the last detail. Through the bond, she feels Axton. He's alive, fighting, moving through the chaos with lethal precision. But he's far away. Too far to reach her in time. The door to her room explodes inward. Not guards. Not friends. Lowell Savage stands in the doorway, flanked by 6 wolves in dark leather armor. Their eyes are cold, their weapons drawn, their intent unmistakable. They're here to kill her. Did you really think, Lowell says, his voice dripping with venom, that I'd let you expose me? That I'd let some Omega whore destroy everything I've built? Ylva backs toward the window, her mind racing. The king will kill you for this. The king is occupied. Lowell steps into the room, his lips curling into a cruel smile. A tragic fire. A rebel attack. So much confusion. And in the chaos, a prisoner escapes, only to fall from the tower window trying to flee. Such accidents happen during times of crisis. He gestures to his wolves. Take her. They move fast. But Ylva is faster. She grabs a shard of broken glass, ignoring the way it cuts into her palm, and slashes at the first wolf who reaches for her. He howls, stumbling back, blood streaming from his face. But there are too many. Hands grab her arms, her hair, dragging her toward the window. She fights, claws, bites, screams, but they're stronger. Always stronger. Throw her, Lowell commands. And through the bond, Ylva feels Axton's rage explode like a supernova. He knows. He feels her terror. Her pain. He's coming. But he won't make it in time. The wolves haul her up onto the window ledge. The drop below is 50 feet of empty air and hard stone. A fall no wolf could survive. Ylva looks at Lowell one last time. The truth will come out, she says. Even if I die, he'll find it. And you'll burn. Lowell's smile widens. Let him try. The wolves release her. And Ylva falls. Falling feels like flying in reverse. The wind tears at Ilva's hair, her torn tunic, her skin. The ground rushes up to meet her, hard stone that will shatter bones, break body, and everything in one brutal instant. She should be screaming. She should be praying. But instead, something inside her wakes up. It's not thought. Not decision. Just instinct buried so deep she never knew it existed. A voice that sounds like her mother's, like the howl of the first wolves, like the moon itself speaking directly into her soul. You are Moondusk. You do not break. You burn. The mark on her neck erupts with light. Power floods through Ilva's veins like liquid starfire. Her bones sing with it. Her blood ignites with it. And for the first time in her life, she understands what she truly is. Not an Omega. Not a servant. Not nothing. She is descended from the wolves who wrote the laws, who shaped kingdoms, who understood that true power doesn't come from strength alone, it comes from the willingness to transform. 10 feet from the ground, Ilva's body shifts. Not into a wolf. Not yet. But into something else, something the pack hasn't seen in 300 years. Silver flames erupt from her skin, wrapping around her like wings, like armor, like the embrace of ancient gods. The fire doesn't burn her. It is her. An extension of will made manifest, of survival crystallized into raw power. The flames catch her fall. She lands in a crouch, silver fire still blazing around her body, her eyes glowing with the same ethereal light as the mark on her neck. The stone beneath her feet cracks from the impact, spider webbing outward in fractal patterns. The courtyard goes silent. Every wolf stops fighting, stops running, stops breathing. Because they're seeing something from legend. Something they thought was just a story. A Moondusk in her true form. Ilva rises slowly, the silver flames dancing around her like living things. She can feel their power, their hunger, their absolute connection to her will. They respond to her emotions, rage for what Lowell tried to do, fury for every year she spent invisible, fire for every wolf who looked through her like she didn't exist. Above, in the tower window, Lowell stares down at her. His face has gone white as ash. Impossible, he whispers. Ilva's voice carries across the courtyard, amplified by power she's only beginning to understand. You wanted me dead because I discovered your treason. Because I threatened to expose you. But you made a mistake, Lowell Savage. She takes a step forward. The flames around her intensify. You tried to kill a Moondusk. And we do not die quietly. Lowell stumbles back from the window, shouting orders to his wolves. Kill her. Kill her now. The 6 wolves who threw her from the tower come charging out of the citadel, weapons drawn, desperation in their eyes. They're not attacking because they believe in Lowell. They're attacking because they're terrified of what will happen if they don't. Ilva doesn't want to hurt them, but she will if she must. The first wolf lunges at her with a sword. She sidesteps, fast as thought, and the silver flames lash out on their own. They wrap around his weapon, heating the metal until it glows red, forcing him to drop it with a scream. He stumbles back, clutching his burned hand, and Ilva moves past him toward the others. Stand down, she commands. This isn't your fight. But they're too afraid to listen. Too committed to the path Lowell has set them on. They attack as one. And Ilva unleashes the fire. The flames explode outward in a wave of silver light, not to kill but to push back, to protect, to create space. The wolves are thrown backward, tumbling across the courtyard, alive but stunned. The fire forms a circle around Ilva, a barrier, a statement, a promise. She will not be touched again. Not by them. Not by anyone. Through the chaos, through the flames, Axton appears. He's covered in soot and blood, none of it his own, his sword still drawn, his golden eyes blazing with fury and something else. Something that looks like awe. He stops at the edge of the silver fire, staring at her. For a moment, neither of them speaks. Then Ilva lowers the flames just enough to let him through. He crosses the barrier without hesitation, without fear, and stands before her. Up close, she can see the cuts on his face, the tension in his jaw, the way his hands are shaking slightly from adrenaline and rage. "Are you hurt?" he asks, his voice rough. "No," she says. "You. Nothing that matters." His eyes search hers, looking past the power, past the flames, seeing her. Just her. "What happened?" "Lowell came to kill me. Tried to throw me from the tower and make it look like an accident." Her voice hardens. "He started the fire. The attack. All of it. To create chaos so he could murder me without witnesses." Axton's expression goes cold. Deadly. He turns toward the citadel, toward the tower where Lowell is surely scrambling to escape. "He won't make it past the gates," Axton says quietly. "I've already given the order. The citadel is locked down. No one leaves." He looks back at Ilva, at the silver flames still dancing around her body, at the mark glowing bright on her neck. "You're a moondusk in truth," he says. "Not a question. A recognition." "I am. And the power? I don't fully understand it yet. But it's mine. It's been sleeping inside me all along, waiting for the moment I needed it most." She meets his eyes. "Waiting for the moment I stopped trying to be invisible." Axton reaches out slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she doesn't, he touches her face, gentle despite the violence still crackling in the air around them. "You're magnificent," he whispers. The words break something inside her. Not in a painful way. In a way that feels like chains falling off, like walls crumbling, like finally being allowed to exist as she truly is. "The prophecy," she says. "Keeper Signa told me that a moondusk would either save the kingdom or burn it to ash. Which will you choose?" Ilva looks around the courtyard, at the wolves staring at her in fear and wonder, at the citadel burning because of Lowell's desperation, at the kingdom built on laws that have been twisted to serve the powerful while crushing the weak. "I choose truth," she says. "I choose justice. And if the kingdom can't survive that," the silver flames pulse brighter, "then maybe it deserves to burn." Axton's smile is sharp, fierce, proud. "Then let's give them truth." He turns to address the gathered wolves, his voice carrying like thunder. Lowell Savage stands accused of treason, of poisoning the grain stores, of attempted murder of the king's bonded mate, and of inciting violence to cover his crimes. He points his sword toward the tower. "Bring him to me. Now." The Blackstone Legion moves as one, flooding into the citadel. And Ilva stands in her circle of silver fire, no longer the scullery maid who scrubbed pots in silence, but the moondusk heir who burns bright enough to light the way toward justice. The great stone of judgment has seen blood before, but never like this. Lowell Savage kneels in chains before the entire pack, his face bruised where the Blackstone Legion dragged him from his hiding place. His expensive robes are torn, his dignity shattered, his arrogance finally stripped away to reveal the terrified, desperate wolf beneath. Evidence surrounds him. Sacks of poison found hidden in his private chambers. Letters arranging the sale of Vargur's territory to rival packs. Testimony from wolves he'd threatened, bribed, manipulated into silence. The truth laid bare for all to see. Axton stands beside the stone, his sword in hand, the weight of judgment in his eyes. But this time, he's not the executioner blindly following orders. He's a king who sees clearly. Ilva stands on the opposite side, no longer in chains, no longer powerless. The silver flames have faded, but the mark still glows on her neck. Her torn tunic has been replaced with simple but clean clothes. Her bare feet are finally wrapped in soft leather boots. She looks like what she is, a survivor who refused to die quietly. Lowell looks up at her with pure hatred burning in his eyes. "You've destroyed everything," he hisses. "The pack will never accept you. You're an Omega. A nobody." A moondusk," Axton interrupts coldly. "Descended from the first wolves. Heir to one of the 3 founding bloodlines. And my bonded mate." He looks down at the old wolf with contempt. while you are a traitor who poisoned his own people for profit. Lowell's mouth opens, closes, opens again. No words come. Axton raises his sword. By the authority of the Iron Codex and the laws of the First Wolves, I find you guilty of treason. The sentence is death. This time, there are no interruptions. No desperate kisses to stop the blade. Just justice, pure and final. The sword falls, and Lowell Savage's reign of corruption ends where Ilva's nearly did on the stone stained with blood. The pack is silent, watching, waiting to see what comes next. Axton turns to face them all, his voice carrying across the courtyard. For too long, this kingdom has forgotten what it was built on. We've confused strength with cruelty, law with oppression, order with silence. The first wolves understood something we lost, that true power comes not from dominating the weak, but from protecting them. Not from enforcing fear, but from earning trust. He reaches out, and Ilva takes his hand. This Omega, this Moondusk, reminded me what it means to seek justice instead of just carrying out sentences. She risked everything for truth. And in doing so, she saved not just herself, but all of us. He raises their joined hands high. I claim Ilva Moondusk as my queen. Not because the bond demands it. Not because the law requires it. But because she's earned it. Through courage, through fire, through refusing to be invisible when the world demanded her silence. Rowena Nightspawn stands in the crowd, her face a mask of rage. But she says nothing, because the law is clear. The bond is witnessed. And the king has chosen. One by one, wolves begin to kneel. Not in submission, in recognition that something has changed. That the old ways are waking up. That maybe, just maybe, the kingdom has a chance to become what it was always meant to be. Ilva stands beside Axton on the tower balcony as the sun sets over Vargr. The fires have been extinguished. The damage is being repaired. The traitor is dead, and the pack is beginning to heal. Are you afraid? Axton asks quietly. Terrified, Ilva admits. I'm about to be queen of a kingdom that wanted me dead 3 days ago. You won't be alone. His hand finds hers. We'll face it together. The corruption we still need to root out. The wolves who will resist change. The challenges of rebuilding trust. Together, Ilva echoes. And somehow, that word makes everything feel possible. She looks out over the kingdom, her kingdom now, and thinks about her mother. About the stories whispered over dying fires. About laws older than kings and power found not through strength, but through refusing to break. Would you have chosen her side? Would you have believed an Omega could become a queen? Would you have looked at a scullery maid and seen the fire burning inside her, waiting for the moment she stopped hiding and started burning? Or would you have been one of the wolves who looked away, who stayed silent, who let injustice happen because it was easier than standing up? The choice is always ours. And sometimes the bravest thing we can do is refuse to let the world make us small. If this story lit something inside you, if you felt that pull in your chest, that hunger for more tales where the powerless find their power and the broken discover they were never truly shattered, then subscribe to Cindy's Wolfheart Stories. Because here, we tell tales that burn. And the fire is just beginning.